You ready?
Desert Tech's divine mission is to create tomorrow's weapons that set new standards of unrivaled performance, empowering elite professionals to safeguard freedom and justice for all future generations. Hey, future weapon enthusiasts. I'm Nick Young, the CEO of Desert Tech, and I'm here with Craig Outzen. This is part 2 of our SIG XM7 rifle versus the Wolverine 6.5 Creedmoor rifle. In this video, we're going to be showing the shootability comparison between the rifles, very specifically illustrating the advantages of the recoil stability factor of the bullpup rifle versus a conventional rifle, the benefits of having a lighter weight front end for fast target transitions, and reduced effective weight burden with the balancing point of the Wolverine being at the pistol grip versus the XM7 with that forward balancing point that creates a significant leverage burden on the shooter. And you're going to be able to really experience the performance of these two rifles. So let's go ahead and have Craig introduce himself.
Hi guys, Craig Outzen. I'm a longtime shooter. Spent a long time as a 3-gun competitor. I was really lucky and fortunate to be on the forefront of 3-gun growing as a sport, which has given me a lot of experience testing guns, trying new guns, testing different setups. Most of that experience has come in a more AR platform rifle. I've had a little bit of exposure to the bullpups. So Nick invited me out to shoot both of these guns, kind of with the precept of me just giving my best effort driving these guns and see what we could do with some drills and see kind of what conclusions we could get from them. And I would just give my best feedback as to what I was seeing and what I was feeling as I drove the guns.
And we've been sponsoring Craig as a 3-gun shooter for the last 2 or 3 years.
I don't know if Nick remembers this, but he was one of my first sponsors when the 3-Gun Nation Pro Series started.
Right.
So on and off, I've had a relationship with Desert Tech. You guys, if anybody has been around me, I'm not here to hide anything with that. I'm not the secret paid squirrel or anything like that. But yeah, I've had a relationship. I've been aware of what Desert Tech's doing. I've had some pretty good time on the bolt guns. The earlier platform with the bullpups a little bit. To be honest, this was the first time that I've had any real time at all on the Wolverine, and the first time I've ever touched an XM7. So to be fair, this would be kind of it was a pretty good head-to-head comparison in that I haven't really had any time on either of these guns.
And he's been shooting our Quattro 15 for the last 2 years. About a year ago, I asked him, you think you can compete with the bullpup rifle? And he kind of sneered at it a little bit, and he's like, I'm going to stick with the AR. So he's a lot like many of you in that he was very skeptical that a bullpup could meet the level of performance of an AR. So this was a good test.
We've had a couple of those conversations over the years, and I'm not horribly opposed to the bullpup. There's definitely some design benefits to having that weight closer into your body for some stuff we do. And to be honest, after doing this, I was maybe even a little bit surprised at how well this gun performs.
So this is the 6.8 Fury round by SIG, and it has a 13.5-inch barrel, and we were shooting SIG's NGSW suppressor to go along with that. So this, in essence, is what the military is deploying with. On the Wolverine side, we have a 20-inch barreled 6.5 Creedmoor, and we were running the Huxworks Helix suppressor. And so when this gun was all done up versus this with the suppressor, I think we were about 3 or 4 inches shorter with the Wolverine. And weight-wise, the guns were within 0.3 pounds. So the XM7 was only 0.3 pounds heavier than the Wolverine. And the bullets we were shooting from the Wolverine were 140 grain projectiles out of the 6.5 Creedmoor. The bullets we were shooting out of the SIG were 113 grain bullets. We will get into the accuracy and ballistics comparison in part 3 of the video, where we did some extreme distance shooting comparisons. What we're finding, just in summary with ballistics, is they're the same. So this 20-inch 6.5 is performing the same as the 13.5 inch if you were shooting the same projectile. But with the 113 grain bullet in this gun versus the 140 grain bullet in this gun, the recoil of this gun is less. However, due to the point of force being behind the pistol grip on this gun, you're going to see that the muzzle is more stable. So even though there's more recoil force going back, the deviation of your sight and the barrel off of target is substantially less in this platform. I did recoil calculations with the 113 grain bullet in the XM7 and has a recoil energy of 7.97 pounds, which is between a 22-250 and a 7.62 by 39. The recoil of this guy with the 140 grain bullets was 8.57 pounds, and that's the equivalent of a 7.62 by 39. So essentially an AK. So that's where we're at. So, and then if for any of you guys that we're going to say, well, you're using a different suppressor, the suppressors are really comparable in their recoil reduction abilities. We've done this same test with the HK MR762 rifles with the same helix suppressor, and we're seeing the same recoil dynamics as what we're seeing here. So just understand that these essentially have the same recoil, same ballistic capabilities, and you get to see what the dynamics look like with shootability now. So we did a series of drills that gave us the opportunity to see the dynamics of the rifles, and we're going to go through those drills together with Craig. When we were shooting these drills, and Craig, he shot each drill maybe between 3 and 5 times with each platform to make sure that we were becoming familiar with the platform enough to do it justice. And then what we did after we got back was we took the fastest time on each of the rifles and we compared those. And so we're going to go through and see what those results look like.
Yeah, and as Nick's been talking, a little comment here on shooting the gun. So maybe a little bit more of an explanation on where I come from looking at these guns. So in the last 15, 20 years, I've had the opportunity to be really involved in a lot of AR developments as far as triggers, muzzle brakes, barrel configuration, gas system links, recoil systems, optics platforms, all of those types of things. I've made a lot of changes. In the competition arena, you are constantly kind of testing something to see if something better is out there. And what that eventually does to you is it does give you a certain sense of being agnostic towards the actual gun or who the manufacturer is or maybe what your favorite thing is. And I would say I'm definitely there. Like there's definitely companies that I like. I have some really great friends in the industry at different companies, all of those kinds of things. But to be honest, I feel like, I've got a good level of objectivity coming into being able to tell whether something's workable, what that thing is doing under recoil, how that thing's presenting when I look through an optic and being on target. So keep in mind when we go through these, that's kind of how I looked at these. I wasn't necessarily looking at this as this platform versus that platform or this gun versus that gun. I tried to give it my best effort at, hey, I'm going to shoot what's in my hand. I'm going to look at how that gun's behaving and what I can do to drive it, either to perform a little bit faster or be a little bit better, and then try to get as good of a run out of it as I could on these drills.
A big part of why we have Craig in is because he's been there, done that. He's a much better shooter than I am or anyone else on staff, and he's gone head to head with Jerry Mikulek, Taryn Butler, Neil Johansson. So he's a pretty humble guy, but he could shoot, and so this is kind of.
I'm getting old, but I could shoot once. Yes. All right, we're up on that.
Our first drill that we did, then he engaged 3 IPSC targets at 10 yards, and he did a transition back and forth between the targets. And the intent of this drill was to see how fast he can come up with the rifle. Is the lighter forend on the bullpup, does it give you a faster target transition speed as you go back and forth in the target.
So drill, we had 3 targets. I think I stepped them off when I set them up. Nick mentioned they're 10 yards at distance, so not a long distance. I set them up at 15 feet between targets, so that there was enough room that you really had to kind of swing the gun and get it moving. I was aiming in on the center target, and I was using the crossbar of the target stand as where I was holding the dot on this. So all the drills started at the same point. Come up on that center target, transition to my right, shoot that 2 on that target, transition all the way over to the 3rd target on the left, shoot 2 on that target. So 6 rounds total. What I found this wasn't surprising at all. 12-pound guns are hard to move around, or harder to move around. They don't want to transition well. They don't want to get going well. They don't want to stop well when you get to the new target point. So knowing that, I knew that I've got a lot of mass to move. So no surprise. The Wolverine is definitely easier to start and stop because so much more of that mass is back between closer to my body. So just center of gravity wise, we've got an advantage there. The SIG, very, very front heavy. For anybody that's picked one up, it's just not even a discussion. That gun's balance point is way out on the front of the gun. It makes it harder to transition. It makes it harder to get that gun started and harder to get that gun stopped. So I guess we didn't mention this. Times are all a surprise to me. So Nick was running the shot timer and nobody was giving me times. I was just trying to shoot the drill as fast as I could.
And we weren't really comparing them on the range.
No. That wasn't the comparison, right? The comparison was for me to have a few tries and to see, what was the best run that I could get with either platform. We did shoot these. They're not set up here, but we did shoot this drill with a 45-degree offset red dot. That's what I normally use. So that was kind of all the same. So everything all being the same, I guess. How did we do?
Should we check it out? We weren't really comparing them. We were just trying to make sure we had some good solid runs with each gun, and we didn't know what the performance was going to look like until we got back and started analyzing the data. However, there were some pretty obvious things in some of the drills that you could tell there was a big difference. So, all right, here we go. Yeah, it's pretty obvious. You could see that front end swings a lot faster.
So a couple things I noticed watching that drill from that camera perspective, and I saw it a lot with the gun. This drill is a fast drill, so we're not going to see a huge time difference across between any of the platforms. We're getting down into a territory at 2 seconds where, that's kind of going to be the territory that we live in. What I will tell you, kind of subjectively, is it was much easier to shoot with the Wolverine. And I think looking at this perspective, you can see that my hits are better with the Wolverine. I was actually centering stuff with the dot, whereas with the SIG, I'm going fast, but I'm actually just shooting brown as soon as I can see it. And it's really obvious here how much different the recoil impulse is and how much that recoil impulse changes how quickly I can get back on target with the gun. But I can tell you that this gun drove much easier than the XM7.
So our second drill that we did a bipod prone shoot. We had 2 steel targets at 150 yards, and he shot 7 shots transitioning back and forth between those 2 targets. But in this drill, you moved your body back and forth to transition these targets.
So when we set this up, I guess maybe we didn't give it enough thought or whatever, but at 150 yards, we did put the targets far enough apart to actually make moving the gun necessary. So it actually is faster just to kind of shift your body, because you can shoot from those 2 points. Neither of those prone positions would be what someone would call an ideal prone, but they were certainly good enough to get hits on targets. That might be a little explanation for you guys. Keep in mind, in a setting like this, as far as what I do and the world I live in, is I'm looking to get a hit on that target to score some points. So I don't get more points by being in the center of the target, of the steel target. I get points for hitting it. So with those targets close together, it was quicker just to do a body movement. Nick talked about that. So we did a second version of this drill, and you'll see that later, where we put the targets farther and we actually do have to move the gun. So you can see both versions of that drill.
And we have through the scope footage on this, so you can actually see the movement of the crosshair and how fast that shot recovery is, and how much that the gun is moving off target under recoil. And remember, the XM7 is shooting 113 grain bullets, Wolverine shooting 140 grain bullets. So even though the force of recoil is greater on the Wolverine, the movement of the muzzle on the XM7, having that point of force be in front of the grip, is causing a lot more vertical and horizontal deflection of the muzzle.
Stand by.
This is the XM7. What do you think of that? Isn't that crazy?
So again, I'm not in crazy world. That's a big difference. And I will tell you guys, I noticed a big difference. Over time, you kind of develop a skill set of driving the gun and getting back on target quickly, being able to transition and find targets and things like that. And so once you have that skill set and you have a gun that works with that, you kind of have a good idea of what goes fast. Then when you shoot a gun that doesn't perform well, or it recoils more, or something's off about it, it actually kind of stands out a little bit more. I kind of feel like I'm kicking the SIG in the teeth, but the recoil on that gun is violent. It's nothing. It is what it is. That's a lot of energy going down in a 13-inch barrel, which means you're taking that gas off earlier than you are in a comparable gun with a longer barrel. That means you're trying to extract that casing when the chamber pressure is much higher, and that's just going to lead to more recoil. Personally, I kind of think there's a couple issues with the SIG in the stock choice on that gun that I would do a little bit differently, that I think would help it out. But that's a teeny little stock, and you're compromised in not only how you can connect to that gun with your shoulder, but you're compromised a little bit with how you can connect with your cheek. So 2 of your 4 contact points on the rifle are a little bit compromised with the SIG. So it recoils a little bit more. You don't have as good a connection to the gun, and it's when you consider that, the time difference isn't surprising, because those things are always going to eat time.
So I was about 4 seconds, over 4 seconds faster, so 32% faster in doing that drill with the Wolverine. And one of the things I noticed too, when I was doing this in the accuracy test portion that you weren't there to witness, and with the H&K that I tested, was because of that excessive movement with the force of the recoil being in front of the point of stability, that even your side picture gets lost. So the target's going out of the image of the optic, yeah. But even being able to maintain a clear, parallax-free view through the optic was a very big challenge with that kind of movement.
If any of you are kind of unfamiliar with shooting quickly on the same target at distance or anything like that, one of the things that I noticed really quickly through the scope cam on here is you do get to see some group sizing. So you will see that the 2 shots that I'm firing out of the Wolverine are actually closer together than the 2 shots that I fire with the XM7. Mm-hmm. That is directly related to what Nick just mentioned. That recoil off that first shot takes more time for me to get back on target, which then if I'm hustling that or driving that or having to do more active control to bring that back on target, I'm likely not going to be able to hold that same tightness with the groupings.
pushed the targets out to 230 yards, and then he suggested that we do some bill drills, which was a really excellent way to show speed of shootability, which is 6 rounds on target as fast as you can. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that drill.
So one of the things when I'm setting a rifle up, there's a few drills that you kind of always do that help you determine what the gun is doing and what you're doing correctly. And so you can kind of, if you're dialing in different parts, dialing in gas system, anything like that. And one of the things I really like to do is at some reasonable distance for the platform, 250, 300 yards is usually where I like to be with an AR. Sometimes I'll do it out farther. But the idea being is I want to take like 6 rounds, 7 rounds and put those shots as quickly as I can call good hits on that target. So I don't allow misses in that, but I want to hit that target 5, 6, 7 times in a row as quickly as I can recover that sight picture and recover that gun to drive it correctly for the next shot. That tells me how that gun is, and that kind of helps me learn what that recoil impulse is like. So obviously I'm very familiar with 223, but let's say I build a gun, I'm shooting a gun in 6 arc, or maybe I'm shooting something else along those lines. 6 Grendel in the past, 224 Grendel, some things like that. That kind of lets me know how that gun's performing and how hard it is for me to drive that gun, or what inputs I have to put into the gun to make that happen. So that's what this test provides for us.
So this is the XM7 first.
Stand by.
So yeah, you were able to fire 6 rounds with the Wolverine in the same amount of time that you were able to fire 4 rounds with the XM7. And as you watch the crosshair movement, the crosshair on the Wolverine essentially stays on the still through the entire recoil cycle, but the crosshair on the XM7 moves more than 10 mils off the target every shot.
One of the things for me shooting the guns was, again, the SIG just has a recoil impulse that's far more violent. It's sharper. I know there's guys out there who will do the bullet weight, velocity calculations, and come up with numbers. I know those exist. I pay attention to them to some degree. The other thing that I also want to look for is how that feels to me and how that looks to me through the scope, because that's far more important to what I do. The feedback I'm getting with the SIG is I get a lot of movement in the gun, and as we tried to do this a couple times on that idea of me getting used to the gun, I was really trying to find a couple different ways with the SIG to see if I could drive that out of the gun and get it to recoil in a better fashion, or get it to be able to be more drivable. It just is what it is. It's a sharper recoiling gun. There's physical measurements to that gun that make it recoil more sharply than this gun. And for those of you who are still stuck on that number thing, I would ask you to kind of consider this in the way that we do suppressors. A lot of people will talk about a suppressor just having an absolute dB reduction, and while that's important, there's kind of a more subjective sense of what is the actual tone like, and how do those things happen. And that's what I would say with these two guns is, yes, you've got a cartridge in the SIG that mathematically has lower recoil energy than the 6.5 that we shot in the Wolverine. However, the way it handles that recoil impulse is wildly different. And you see it through the video here that it's more difficult to control and drive than the Wolverine.
And we were having a discussion. So, as you look at the point of force, so the point of force on the SIG is at the barrel extension, the bolt lugs right here in front of the point of stability. And that same point of force on the Wolverine is clear behind here. And so if you liken it unto a pistol, if you have a pistol and somebody pushes on the front of your pistol, it's going to want to go up and sideways in every which way. But if somebody was applying the same force of the slide, pulling it backward, you'd have that same force of movement, but it would not be deflecting the muzzle all over the place like what we're seeing with the SIG. You ready? At 230 yards, you engage 2 targets, and this one we intentionally moved the rifle because we wanted to determine, how difficult it was to, move that gun in a prone position with speed, simulating you got multiple targets that you got to rapidly engage.
So this wasn't a huge transition, but it was a bigger transition to where it was physically necessary to move the gun rather than just me kind of shuffling my body back and forth. So that's kind of what you'll see here.
And it definitely was a lot longer on the time too, as you look at the speed.
Whenever there's more things to do, it takes more time. Trust me on that one.
But you can see the last 2 shots, it kind of dragged and didn't.
Yep.
I was honestly extremely impressed with how well you were able to drop that rifle right on target. Like, you could tell he knows what he's doing.
Lots of practice.
Yeah.
What ended up being here, this one actually, I did. I don't know if it's totally visible in the video, but I had to do 2 different techniques with these guns. Generally, with my match rifles, I can actually pick that gun up with my hand on the grip, in my shoulder contact, and pick the front end up and move it back and forth where I want to. I was able to do that with the Wolverine. I wasn't able to do that very reliably with the SIG. Like, I could still do it, but then I was off target a little bit, or I wasn't able to place the gun where I wanted as easily. So with the SIG, the technique I used was I actually took my offhand out from under support position on the buttstock and was actually moving the gun back and forth. And it worked fine. Like, obviously you guys can judge for yourself what the time difference is to you and how significant that is or isn't. In my world, that is a huge time difference. And then again, through the scope. With the SIG, you're seeing the increased recoil, and I have to do something else to move the gun. So it's just a more difficult gun to shoot. And anytime you have more difficulty or you have to do more techniques to handle it, it's gonna show up on a timer. The timer measures the efficiency you do things, so anytime you add, it shows up there, and it's a great way to measure things.
next drill is a barricade drill, still 230 yards. I believe that you were just shooting one target from, I think it was
multiple positions on the, I think we wound up with 5.
Okay, very good. So we'll go ahead and go through that now.
Stand by.
Might have had a miss in there. Sorry. Again, a very significant time difference here. We're seeing, obviously there's some movement. So let's be honest in this, that movement time is always a part of your shooting performance in the timer. So this time difference isn't directly all one gun or the other. There's parts of me in there and moving, getting into position. Sometimes you hit that position really nice. Sometimes you need to make a couple of adjustments before you can let that round go to get your hit. So just as a caveat, not all of that time is the guns. However, where I would talk about this is the SIG is that this is where the front heavy really kind of showed itself. So the SIG versus the Wolverine, it is really difficult to be connected to your shoulder, hand on the grip, and move the gun without any accessory. So if you're trying to set up a bag, or you're trying to get out of a position and move your body with some assistance with this arm, and you're running the gun with one hand, the SIG gets really heavy because that tipping point and that balance point is so far away from your body. So there is some of that. And then again, recoil plays a role every time we do 2 shots. That recoil is, and we pick 2 shots for a reason. If you just shoot one, you get to bail out and that recoil doesn't punish you. But if you shoot 2, that recoil of that first round, you have to overcome that to get that second round hit. So in this time difference, let it be known, or you guys have to know, regardless of the movement, the recoil difference and the weight balance of these rifles allows you to do, or causes you to do more work with the SIG, allows you to have it a little bit easier with the Wolverine.
Well, and as I watch that too, you can tell as you move from position to position. With the Wolverine, the muzzle stays with you. With the SIG, it's like the muzzle trails behind. And so you're kind of dragging it behind and then having to whip it back up on top.
Full disclosure, you guys can have whatever opinion you want. You can tell me to go to the gym, and I probably need to, but the SIG, if you can handle the SIG with 1 point of contact in your shoulder and 1 point of contact in your strong hand, and you can do anything you want with it, I tip my hat to you, sir. You are a strong man.
Oh, yeah.
That's a heavy gun.
Nice. The next drill that we did was reload comparisons. So definitely this is probably the arena that you were the most outside of your element trying to reload the bullpup, right?
It bit me here and it bit me here. I honestly had not. Again, full disclosure, right? I've had some time on the MDR, and I had reloaded the MDR. That was in 223. So I actually, before this day, had never really performed any kind of speed reload or functional reload on having the bigger platform of the Wolverine 308 mags, right? So everything else had always been with a 223 conversion in it. So yeah, we did a few we actually were pretty fair. I think we did like 7 or 8 reloads with each gun. Maybe even we got into 10 of shoot one, reload, shoot one, so that they had a lot of fairness to them. So yeah, it took me a second with the Wolverine as far as how I wanted to grab the mag and how that mag interfaced with the mag well and how much room I had to work with it. But it actually came into speed pretty quickly. And as far as the XM7 goes, like, no sweat. That gun platform I'm pretty familiar with as far as reloads go. So let's see what the video says.
So just a couple points of review that I want to make as we go through this. As we were reviewing the footage, then in some of the drills when he would reload, he'd have his fingers straight and be safe, and others he had his finger on the trigger. And there was a very obvious difference between the times when he would reload with the finger straight and on the trigger. And so what we did was we started the timer from the shot break. That way we eliminated that variance, because sometimes you did it on the Wolverine, sometimes you did it on the XM7, and it was really an anomaly that it wasn't an accurate depiction of that reload process.
Why didn't you call me for the DQ?
Yeah,
You should have.
Let's see how.
I think we have a slow motion too.
Those fingers look golden. Just saying.
So I did a lot of analysis to try to figure out, because I'm all about body mechanics and what movements and everything are optimizing the whole process. And the things that I observed is on the Wolverine, it's you tended to be slower in changing the mag out. And on every video that we looked at, you always had the magazine in after the XM7. So with the Wolverine, he was always a little bit after. But you made up for that deficiency because the bolt release was right by the magazine in the back, and you didn't have to bring the rifle back out from underneath your arm. You can see when you're loading the XM7, you're actually supporting the weight of the gun under your arm, and so it takes a decent amount of time to bring it back up on target.
There was another question Nick asked when we were doing this. He's like, well, why don't you keep the gun up? And I was like, well, actually, we never reload that way, because if we're reloading, we're always trying to move somewhere. Which that's not only a good competition idea, I'd say that's a pretty good gunfighting idea, for at least I've been told. But the point being is generally my technique is to have a little bit of a hook onto the top of the buttstock of the gun right under your armpit while you manipulate the gun. It keeps the mag well a little bit steadier. It gives you kind of rock solid places to be, rather than, and especially under movement, you're not moving the gun around while you're moving. So the technique that I used on these was both the same, was to hook that. However, you do need it on the XM7. If that butt stock happens to come out from your armpit or whatever, you kind of make sure that you anchor it to, it's gonna start tipping on you. Whereas the Wolverine, that's a good place to be. It locks it up, but as I'm getting the mag in the gun and unlocking, I'm able to drive the gun up and be on target. So there's a little bit of, back to the same thing, the actual physical characteristics of the guns dictate a little bit here. And that forward weight of the XM7 just isn't helpful.
But yeah, for sure. But the balancing benefit made up for that unfamiliarity with the loading in the back.
Yeah.
A lot of guys talk about how hard is it to reload from each of the firing positions, standing, kneeling, and prone. And so we wanted to really compare all of those positions. And sometimes you get guys in service saying, well, what about a plate carrier? How is that going to interfere in my gear? And so part of the benefit of Craig is he kind of has a permanent plate carrier that he walks around with. It's kind of like I do a little bit. We have another slow motion.
So yeah, so to address kind of what Nick's talking about, obviously I reload from the belt a lot. That's generally how we run our stuff in a lot of competitions. Occasionally there's different competitions we'll run maybe a carrier, or we'll run a shingle that we reload off of. In all the times that I've trained that, I haven't noticed a huge difference in reloading off of. Actually, you're probably arguably a little bit slower on both. I don't think plate carrier or shingle would make much of a difference with the Wolverine. I wouldn't change my technique at all. All I would do is move around whatever is in the landscape. And that's the technique that you see me employ here is not anything new. It's not some super secret deal. It's get the mag out of the gun, get the offhand driving to the source of your reloadable mag, and then getting that gun back in the gun and getting the gun up and running. So if you're running a plate carrier, if you're running some gear here, I totally get that the argument could be with this magwell on the Wolverine being back, you might have to work around a little bit more. I would simply solve that by just driving my shoulder forward and putting that out in front, and again being able to visualize it and see it. The bolt release on the Wolverine, pretty intuitive once you try it a couple times with just running your thumb up the back of the magazine as you seat the mag. So I don't think in the runs that we didn't show you where I was kind of getting used to things or maybe running it a little bit, I don't think I had any failures to seat with the Wolverine. That actually I think kind of helps in trying to hit that bolt catch and you driving the mag in, so it's maybe kind of a added bonus. On the XM7, the one thing that I did notice is there is no reloading it and dropping the bolt with your thumb. If you have learned the technique of reloading to an empty gun with the bolt back and you're going to drop the bolt with your thumb,
on the left side. On the left side,
yeah. If you're going to run the bolt catch from the left side with your thumb, it's not happening. The finger bolt catch on the right side works great, but that left side bolt catch is incredibly stiff, and there's not a lot of space for your thumb to hit it. Wow. So the stiffness is such that even when you try to push it, and I don't know if it's a one-off on the example of the gun we've got, we need to kind of say that may be, but it is so stiff that you are white knuckling it, getting that thing to depress from the left side of the gun. Wow. Now, great, it's got the finger drop on the right side. I love those. I think and it worked fine. But if you're a person that has trained that forever, you're going to have to work something out to solve it with that gun.
Right.
And one quick thing on the reloading from kneeling. There's a bigger time difference here. And one of the things I'll say with that is you're not quite as stable kneeling. I know people shoot from kneeling and think it's more stable, but it's really only more stable when you can get both knees on the ground. But kneeling, as I did here with one leg up, one leg down, you're a little bit more out of balance, or it's easier to get out of balance. And that time was taken up with that weight, with handling that excess weight of the XM7 out in front of you. So that's where I would chalk that up.
The off balance, huh?
Yep.
Next drill is reload from the prone position. This one, you're actually faster with the XM7 than the Wolverine.
So the XM7 gets a win.
1%.
Yeah, the XM7 gets a win here.
Yeah.
There's less stuff around that magwell being out front when you're prone, period. And a little bit up with the backhand. As you come in for that reload, you've got a good clearance. I can already visualize the magwell. And for you guys that maybe haven't practiced a lot of reloads, one of the keys to reloads is actually visualizing all of those component parts going together. Two things kind of hampered the Wolverine a little bit is that magwell being closer to you is a little bit out of your view. And you've got more things going on back here when you've got, whether that's buttstock, whether that's a bag if you go prone, things like that. There's just less room to get that reload done. In the video, you see the initial drop mag actually stood up for me, so kind of had to knock that out of the way. So give the XM7 something here. Being on a bipod, obviously I don't have to manage that front end weight with it. So yeah, but as you can also see, totally a doable reload with the Wolverine. And again, give it some time and a little training, I'm sure that would smooth out quite a bit. Much better.
The reason that we did this drill,
I think Nick did it to entertain himself. I'm gonna stick with that.
Yeah, to endanger Craig.
Yeah,
for sure. But so the reason we did this drill is because this XM7 rifle is technically supposed to replace the M4. You know, which means it's going to be something that's in the CQB environment where you're opening doors, and there's going to be situations where you may have to do an engagement with one hand. You know, maybe you're opening a door, engaging somebody, holding something out of the way. Perhaps, you know, an innocent bystander is, you have to I guess, redirect them and engage somebody. And so it's a viable thing that you're going to have to be able to deal with. And so the drill was that he had to carry 2 saber-tooth rifles on top of his shoulder in the rifle case, which is, I don't know, roughly 25 pounds. So it wasn't a ton.
It wasn't a huge weight. It was enough weight to take out the left side to occupy my arm and to cause you to be maybe just a touch off balance. It wasn't strenuous by any means, but it definitely made it to where I can't assist myself holding the gun up except with my strong side.
Yep. And so he had to engage with just one arm, which was actually pretty funny. So here's his first attempt. Stand by. Push it yourself. All right, here we go.
Yep.
Stand by. Here's the Wolverine.
So what you guys saw is after that first attempt of trying to actually shoulder the XM7 and be able to get a visualization through the red dot sight and actually shoot an aimed shot, there wasn't any, I couldn't keep that gun up on my shoulder and still move. If I'd gone maybe the other direction and kind of cranked into my body, that might have been doable, walking back the other way, but as far as going off side and carrying something, that wasn't going to happen. So I had to let that go down. What you saw me do with the XM7 was I didn't take aimed shots through the offset optic. I got hits, but that was just, you know, basically I locked the butt stock under my armpit and was able to hold the gun up there. That's how you saw it horizontal. I don't think I could have held that gun horizontal in any other fashion than that. So that then negates getting on the optics at all. Whereas with the Wolverine, I was actually able to shoulder that, get the gun up, and I was using the optic to shoot those targets. So not only was it faster, arguably whatever targets you may have to shoot in that type of scenario would have gotten better hits and things like that. Yeah, and again, it's not really an argument for me. That's just the physical characteristics of that rifle and where it carries its weight.
Well, and the interesting thing is everybody is so worried about the overall weight of the system, and both of these guns are within 0.3 pounds. So this is 13 pounds, and this is just a hair under 13 pounds. And it illustrates that burden of the rotational torque. So because that forward weight on the XM7 brings the muzzle down so much, it increases the burden of weight by 8.1 pounds. Let's see, I got it written down here. 8.1 pounds, right? Dang it, I should have, yeah, 8.1 pounds. So even though this gun weighs 13 pounds, the effective burden that the soldier endures is 21.15 pounds. And so, and it's a real theme. Like some of the themes that we're talking about, rotational torque, recoil stability factor, this is engineering 101 principles, and this is real science anyhow. But you can see as he brought that XM7, that impact of that torque.
I'm a science guy. Early on in my college career, I was an engineering student for a little while, so I'm not here to not talk about the science, but I want to give you guys just a little bit more insight into my perspective. There is all the science, and it's fun to nerd out on numbers, and it's fun to nerd out on what is the system weight, what is the scope mount weight, scope, all of those types of things. All of that's fun. My focus when I'm shooting this stuff is how efficient can I be shooting these guns. And there's just some more, there's some compromise they have to make. Both of these guns are heavy guns. 12-pound guns aren't fun to sling around. They're not easy to sling around. We're shooting large frame calibers. Those are obviously going to give us more recoil that we have to manage. My argument is that the better you manage those things, the better you'll be able to shoot the gun. And I guess that's not an argument, but just what I'm saying, I say that to emphasize that if you manage the heavy weight of the gun better by balancing it out over the length of the gun and getting more of that weight closer to the shooter's center of gravity, that gun's going to handle better for him. If that recoil energy is better managed because you've got a longer gas system that's operating under a lower pressure, that's going to be helpful to the shooter. So we can have the discussion of the actual math, and there's some advantages and disadvantages there, and then we can talk about like exactly how that feels when you shoot it. And I think both of those things are important.
Well, it's kind of like this, those sports cars, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got the supercars, and the best, fastest cars, best handling cars, they have the engine mounted in the center of the car so that they can dynamically move, and they don't have that leverage disadvantage in all their movements. And really, we're kind of applying those same kinds of principles to rifle systems.
Yeah. Well, and the same analogy applies if we take vehicles into account, right? Like the magazines, the sales articles all talk about these measurable objectives, 0 to 60 times, or what's the weight of the gun, what's the weight of the scope, what's the power of the optic, things like that. And those are important data points or things to know of. It also matters how that works together as a system and how it actually feels to shoot it. So you may not have the fastest 0 to 60 car, but it's a much better handling car because dynamically it's designed better. And the same thing goes for rifles. There's things we know that rifles do when they have a very short gas system. When rifles have a very short gas system, they recoil more violently than a rifle with a longer gas system. There's no getting away from that. There might be a trick or two, or there might be some engineering voodoo that a company can come up with to mitigate that, but at its baseline, it's still going to be more violent.
Right. In today's video, we focused on shootability, transition speed, recoil control, and all of that. And like I said at the start of the video, performance-wise, ballistic-wise, these are identical. And this is pretty significant because I posed the question a year or so ago that I think we could have achieved the exact same performance or better with just doing a 6.5 Creedmoor in a bullpup platform like this. And I think that we're definitely illustrating that to a very high degree here today. So.
To Nick's point, that's probably the case. I think if we look over the history of time and Wildcats and caliber and chambering developments, I think all of those arguments exist over and over again. I think the answer to that isn't directly related to any technical thing. As shooters, that's going to always be our business. That's kind of been part of the gun game and what makes people tick. On my end of things, I look at it again, or I kind of look at it through this lens as like how much performance can I get out of that platform, or maybe even how does that platform help me perform better? And so I think the principles are clear. Weight manageability and recoil management offer the shooter a benefit in that it lessens the burden on that shooter. And for me, it's kind of like I said, it's not necessarily surprising, because you can look at some of the specs on these guns and you can see there's one that's going to handle better than the other. There's one that's weight balance is better. There's one that has a smoother, less intense recoil exposure to the shooter, regardless of what the numbers might say. All of those things help me shoot better and shoot faster, so I like that.
Right. So we're going to have our part 3 video air in the next week or so, and in that video we're going to deep dive into the actual ballistic performance data and the accuracy data at distance. So please subscribe to the channel so that you can watch that when it releases, and like this video if you enjoyed it, and drop Craig a comment thanking him for helping us.
Always. It was fun. We had a good time.
Yeah, get an actual professional here to run these rifles through their paces. So, and if you have any questions in the comments that we didn't really answer in this video, please ask, and we'll try to respond over the next couple days. Thanks for watching.